Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to Quadriga, coming to you from the heart of Berlin. And suddenly it seems there is a new mood in German politics. Voters are going green in numbers. In recent opinion polls, the environmentalists have, for the first time ever, ousted Angela Merkel's Conservative Christian Democrats as the country's most popular party. And there's growing talk that the next chancellor could even be a Green. So our question this week on Quadriga is: the Greens, Germany's new #1. And to discuss that question, I'm joined here in the studio by Professor Wolfgang Merkel from the Berlin Social Science Centre, who says the Greens are the party of the privileged and as such their natural upper limit may be touched at 20%. Also with us is prominent business journalist and commentator Ursula Weidenfeld, who believes no other party has struggled as much as the Greens to accept the spirit of the market economy. Interesting. And a very warm welcome too to DW's own Maximiliane Koschyk, who as a political correspondent for Deutsche Welle keeps a close eye on the Greens. And Maxi argues that the Greens must choose between purity and breadth. They can't please everyone, she adds. Interesting. Thank you for those three statements at the top of the show. First question goes to Maxi. Maxi, how green is Germany?
I think Germany is getting greener every election. We see that in especially the state elections the last couple of years. We've seen that in Bavaria last year, where the Greens have become the second biggest force in the Bavarian parliament, which was traditionally very conservative and reigned by Merkel's sister party, the Bavarian Conservatives. We've seen that also in Hesse, one of the other conservative strongholds where the Greens gained significantly. They're getting a foothold in almost every of Germany's states. The question is, how ready are they going to be governing these states? How willing are they going to be governing states? And is this still a debate we only see in the West? Because we'll have a couple of elections coming up in Eastern Germany, and the Greens haven't gained quite a foot there yet.
Ursula Weidenfeld, the reason I'm asking about how green is Germany is because you will know that people outside Germany are always asking whether they're aware that Germany has a long environmentalist green tradition. And I wonder whether you believe that image of Germany still stands up, is still valid.
Yes, of course, it is. Climate change protection has moved in the middle, into the mainstream within the last month. And I think that the Green Party's success is in some kind, you can understand it as the movement of climate change protections within the families, within a broader society we have.
Professor Merkel, the question is, I suppose, the success of the Greens that has now been on the rise, as Maxi was pointing out, for quite some time. Is it here to stay? Because they've been here before and have faded back to becoming a 10–15% party. Are they here to stay this time as one of Germany's leading forces?
I'm a bit more cautious about these polls we are reading at present. Polls are polls, elections are elections. And by the way, European elections are different from national elections. In national election, the people will vote more for a party where they not only have trust and have sympathies, but they must think that they are able to govern. And if we are looking to the two people at the top of the Greens, we would immediately say they do not have any experience in governing. And to jump from the top of the party into the main offices of the country, it's a long way to go. And this will be in the perception of the voters as well.
OK, we'll talk about those two potential leaders in a minute, but just to, you characterise the Greens as a party of privilege. That sounds very dismissive.
No, it's not, and it's simply empirical. This is the empirical truth we know. The Greens have the electorate where you find most of the formerly very good educated people. And this is one reason why I'm also skeptical that the Greens will really jump at the top of our party system. They draw extensively on the voters in metropolitan and urban cities, and where you find well-educated middle classes. And this is a limited electorate. They do not have any crush on the voters of the lower third of the society,
But Robert Habeck says there is a new dynamic in German politics. He says the pattern of German politics is changing, and he says the Greens can harness that dynamic and become a broader-based party.
Yes, and they will, just one sentence. Yes, they will try to do it. And we cannot explain the rise of the Greens without the steep decline of the two catch-all parties, the CDU and the SPD. They are, to some extent, blood donors to the Greens.
And I think that one explanation is that people are fed up with the two governing parties. They experienced them for 10, 12, 14 years now. And
the two parties that make up Angela Merkel's
CDU
so-called
and
Grand
SPD,
Coalition.
yes,
Yeah.
The Grand Coalition. And people are fed up with that. And one part of voters turn to the Greens, and the other part turns to the right-wingers.
I think exactly the way we have to look currently where the electorate is moving is going to give us an indication, as you say, how the Greens can develop. Because as much as they're taking blood, as you called it, from the centre-left and right conservative and social democratic parties, they're also letting blood to the left. So what we've seen in the national election 2017 is that as much as the Greens had gained votes, they also lost a couple of votes to the left, especially in these metropolitan areas and in these state elections where we have a much more rural community, where we also see the Greens succeeding. We can get a bit of a feeling for the potential they can have with the lesser elitist part of the German electorate. And I think that is why the upcoming elections in the east of Germany will be especially interesting, because there we will have the least of this classic Green electorate. And this is where they need to start their actual convincing of a broader electorate, and if they will succeed there.
But the time of big parties is drawing to an end in Europe. We will not find these Volksparteien.
You're searching there for the German word. You're looking for the
because catch-all parties is a bit more negative than the positive connotation we used to have for the Volksparteien. And this time is more or less over. You do not find very many in Europe anymore. And the Greens will not become the new catch-all party in Germany in a time.
Let's talk about that. Let's get some pictures, first of all, and then come back to that theme, yeah? Because as we've seen, the Greens go right back to the 1980s, and for many there's one moment in particular when they really established themselves on the national radar. Here it is.
White sneakers. It's an unforgettable image. Joschka Fischer taking his oath of office as the Green Party's first ever minister. He was making a provocative statement with the shoes, yet for many it was proof that the Greens weren't to be taken seriously. But no one's saying that anymore. While the party has enjoyed successes in the past, it's now more popular than ever, mainly thanks to its likable leaders, Annalena Baerbock and Robert Habeck. Young, feisty and trustworthy, they're politicians who aren't afraid of taking on responsibility. From entrepreneurs to the unemployed, from young to old, people are voting for the Greens. For us, that means it's our duty to communicate and operationalize our policies, developed when we were in a minority position, so that they find broad public support. Climate protection, the Greens' fundamental issue, is now a hot topic for people from all walks of life. So are the former eco-warriors on their way to becoming Germany's next major party.
There we are, that's the question. The next major party. They're talking about what you were talking about, Wolfgang Merkel, about these Volksparteien. Just give us another idea so that our viewers really understand how elementary that has been for German politics, and explain why the Greens cannot be, in your estimation, a Volkspartei, a big tent party.
Volksparteien played a major role in the second half of the 20th century. But till then, we see a steep decline. And they are important for heterogeneous societies to keep it together on a political level. And they can only do it if they draw voters across all social classes, across all age cohorts, and all cultural milieus. And this is not what the Greens are prepared to do. They may exploit more and more this milieu of cosmopolitanism we find in urban area. They will gain a lot of votes from the younger people, but they will not get so many votes from the people above 60, which is a major share of our electorate.
What do you say to all that, Ursula?
I think that Wolfgang Merkel is right. We do have millions of somewheres living in Germany, and not only anywheres the Green Party is addressing. So I think we do have a deep divide in society.
Explain for the viewer what the difference is between a somewhere and an anywhere. These are terms that are just entering the political discourse.
Who is well educated, who can live everywhere in the world, who is mobile and who is quite open to any forms of living on social status and things like that. Somewhere people who are in most time live on the countryside, have a job, have a family, and want to stay there. They want to stay somewhere and have their home somewhere. So and there are millions of somewheres living in Germany, and they are not as attracted by the Green Party as the anywheres are. I think that this is one problem. The other one is that the society is divided, even in Germany. And in a divided society, you won't find political parties which cover the whole electorate.
Maxi, you say in the quote at the top of the show, the Greens must choose between purity and breadth. Tell me a little bit more about that. Because
we've seen how the Greens have been trying to branch out in the last couple of years. They've been trying to get to the somewheres of
we must concede that they have, to a certain extent, been successful. Exactly. They have moved into other age groups. They have moved into other areas of society, lower income areas. It is possible now for a nurse or a bus driver to be a Green voter, surely.
And the interesting thing is, if we look especially on the German state level, like if we don't try to see it in the federal and the broader German perspective, but on the regional perspectives, how they learn to cater to different needs in different German regions. So, again, coming back to the spectacular example of last year's election in Bavaria, we've seen that the Conservative Party, the CSU in Bavaria, and the Social Democrats were both going very heavy on the immigration issue. They were both majorly putting their campaign on that card, and they failed miserably both. The Greens were broadening out their campaign much more. They were campaigning on a lot of different issues that are not nationally green issues. They're campaigning also on the challenge of agriculture, which you would think they would normally do with an organic angle. They didn't. They were talking a lot about the issues of conventional agriculture, something you wouldn't have heard from them 10 years ago.
Politicians. So they, on the state level, the Green Party does turn to conservative issues, preservation of creation and things like that, and addressing Christians, addressing people who are quite conservative in their mind.
I think despite the fact that they, according to you, Ursula, have struggled to embrace intellectually the market economy, struggled more than any other party, you say.
Yeah, but this is the economic part of Green politicians. They, as an opposition party, they just chose and picked small issues like fireworks on New Year's Eve, or sugar in lemonades and things like that, and just went on these issues only to fight too much sugar, too much things of everything. And that is contrary to the understanding of social market economy. You would only frame economy and the market and not go for special issues. And the Green Party is the party which is most keen on intervening in small topics and not just giving a frame and let the market go within this frame.
Wolfgang Merkel.
Ursula mentioned an important point. The Greens are in opposition. And if a party is in opposition, it can claim some purity of its stance, of its program. If they have to go into government, they have to make trade-offs. trade-offs between the environmental
But they've learned
policies.
to do that in places like Hesse and in places like Baden-Württemberg.
This is a quite different thing, because...
You've got to start somewhere.
At the state, they do not decide about economic policies, not about tax policies, not very much about labor market policies. But these are the areas where the trade-offs will come up between clear environmental policy and these kind of policies.
They have been for 7 years in German government from 1997.
It didn't do very much. You are right. They were not punished about this.
They're getting an interest for these topics, though, especially fiscal policy. I thought it was quite interesting to see that on a federal level, the Greens have now proposed to attack one of the holy principles of the Grand Coalition, the Black Zero. I mean, we've seen a policy proposal now by the Greens, and this is something we would have expected from the Social Democrats, by the Greens, to say we need to address the investment gap, we need to go away from the Black Zero policy, and we need to think about structural investments in our infrastructure, in our telecommunications networks, and we need to find a different policy for this. And
the name for that policy is deficit spending.
Yes, it is. And that is... it came from the European level down, trickled down to the German level, and I think that the fiscal competence of the Green Party mainly is on the European level and not so much on the German level. But on the other hand, it is the only party which is prepared to stop the Black Zero, and I'm not so sure whether this is something many people in Germany would agree to.
But the Social Democrats already recognized that this Black Zero never have been a traditional Social Democratic policy.
Yet their finance minister is committed to it.
Like Wolfgang Schäuble has been.
Yeah, but this is Schäuble. This is not not a Social Democratic policy.
But it is still the Social Democratic finance minister who's defending it.
But they will recognize that this does harm to the party, and they will change in these issues, hopefully, because they react to the other main competitors. And I'm pretty much sure that this Black Zero, which has never been very welcomed among the rank and files and the functionaries of the party, will be one of the first sacrifices of the Social Democratic parties to catch up again,
But that wouldn't be an argument to go for the SPD. So it would be an argument for the Left Party or for the Green Party.
The fact that the Greens have this vigour now to address these issues, to not shy away. They're not shying away from issues of security policy either. Their security policy speaker on the federal level in the German parliament, Agnieszka Brugger, she is being very outspoken of challenging the ideas the Greens have been thinking about security policy. It used to be a very pacifist approach in the kind of left tradition, and they're now becoming much more realistic. They're still staying, and this is the point. I think it will be interesting to see where on these hard issues that define, as you say, German politics, will they make a decision for their principles versus their broader appeal, or can they make their principles broader appeal?
Well, and in economic policies or in social policy, it is mainly storytelling. It is not as detailed and as reliable as you told it for the interiors and security policies.
Nevertheless, Ursula, it is said that the Greens have a very impressive, skillful, well-briefed, knowledgeable leadership duo.
Yeah, of course, they do. But neither of them had to have to govern a state or a city or whatever. So we don't know how they would deliver if they were in responsibility. And Robert Habeck said, well, we have to deliver now. And he has to prove that he is able to deliver.
The time of trade-offs begins, and this will do harm to the more orthodox and purists among their voters.
Absolutely.
But let me just come back to that point. I didn't assume that when I listed the qualifications for leadership of the Green tandem that you were going to say yes, of course. But Professor Merkel, do the two Green co-leaders are they chancellorship material?
This is not
they are being
quite
talked
easy
about as potential
to judge
chancellors.
it here now from the studio. They do not have experiences, and they should have some experiences. I cannot think about one Bundeskanzler in our history who did not have experiences in directing executives, and they have not been at the top of a land in Germany. And even this is something which is so different from governing in the federal system. So I'm doubtful, and I would say both have to collect experiences as well. But on the other hand, I do not think that they become the strongest party in the next elections.
And I think you have to admit that Bundeskanzler is a job you just grow with the position. So if you look at Helmut Kohl or Angela Merkel in their first year, but in their first years, it was not every time joy just to watch them and to experience their kind of leadership.
The question is even if these two candidates or these two party leaders are going to be the actual candidate. Because, I mean, what we've seen now, they've always been leading, the party leaders have been leading these campaigns, but obviously never with the intention of one of them becoming a lead candidate for an actual job, because it's two people and they're campaigning together. Now, the natural assumption is that Robert Habeck, the charismatic male leader, would become it, and there's already been talks about, well, shouldn't maybe the woman, Annalena Baerbock, becoming the candidate? I think it's quite interesting.
The more intelligent.
And for example, talking
I don't know if we should be qualifying people's intelligence.
Qualification-wise, she's, for example, academically more qualified. She studied international law. He has studied some liberal arts. And just to talk about these things, there is fine distinctions, but the question is, does it even have to be one of the two of them? They have now a significant amount of members, high-ranking, quite popular members that have executive experience on the European or on the,
they're the most popular.
Federal or state level.
The most popular, and to some extent the electoral success of the Greens can be traced back probably more to Habeck, and I'm hesitating to say this as a man in public. So he is a real popular figure, and
why are you hesitating to say it?
Yeah, because it could be the classical male chauvinist of a white old man here. This is a reason. But I do think she is probably, even for German standards, too young for it. This is another reason.
Aged 38 at this point in time?
Is she?
I think so.
Yeah.
Robert Habeck just about touching 50.
Yeah, but even 38, there will be a discussion in Germany.
You mentioned the word charisma, and clearly a lot of German voters. I don't think this is just press hype. I think a lot of people really out there on the streets watching their TV programmes are very impressed by Robert Habeck. They find him they find him a charismatic figure.
But I warn you again. We've seen this. It's interesting to see it in direct comparison to the Social Democrats, which have a lot of prominent popular figures, or not so popular anymore, but a lot of prominent figures on the national level that several Germans, the Germans know. We have from the party leader to the cabinet ministers to the heads of the states. With the Greens, it's quite interesting that they always seem to be concentrated on several small figures, like the party leadership, or maybe now we do know also the head of the parliamentary groups. But it's interesting to see. I'm coming back to Bavaria because it was very interesting. It was a almost copy of Annalena Baerbock and Robert Habeck that was running the campaign there. It was Ludwig Hartmann and Mr. Schulze. And they were quite the same team. And in the end, it was clear at that point that if they would be able to lead a government, it would be the male candidate, because they had already sorted out the qualifications. He was the more qualified person. And that's why I'm coming back to principle versus appeal. They need to find their decisions before they appeal with them to the voters. They need to make these decisions now. And this is something that needs to be happening not based on polls, but needs to be based on their own convictions, because they're a party that is very much about convictions, about policies. They started as a party that was only based on the ecological purpose, on the ideological policy.
It's a one-issue party, essentially, an anti-party as well.
If they then have an internal discussion, who would be the candidate which brings most of the voters to the party, they will also opt for the most popular figure of the party. And then this is a matter of appeal, and parties are about vote maximizing.
Ursula, what's going to happen next?
Well, I think that discussions within the Green Party on fiscal policies and social policies, on all these issues you have to address if you want to become a governing party and probably a party which has the chance to be Bundeskanzler. They have to sort it out now, and they have to sort out who is not only the most popular, but also the most prominent and the most intelligent person to go for it.
There's also a point. Think about the Greens step into government. They start with their measures against climate change, which is absolutely right and correct. But we all know it will not change the climate. Germany is only responsible for 2 to 3% of the carbon emission. So they will not change anything, and the people will expect successes, but they cannot grab it.
They're the big opposition on the right side.
This will be a shock of reality for the Green voters as well.
OK, with the shock of reality, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you very much for joining me here today on Quadriga. We've been talking about Germany's potential new #1, the Greens. A lot of scepticism in the room about that prospect. Bye-bye. Come back next week. Tschüss.